With the events of Chapter 16 of Boruto's 2 Blue Vortex coming to a close, people are starting to get a bit nervous. Like the calm before the storm, the last couple of chapters of 2 Blue Vortex haven't included that much in the way of action, as it seems as though the last couple of chapters have been dedicated to exposition, telling us how certain characters got their very broken abilities, or to build up towards possible friendships that are going to be key in the battle against the Shinju moving forward. And yet amongst all of this exposition and character building in the last couple of chapters, by far and away the most important revelation has been that Gaara was sealed away in an iron sand dome by Shinki before Shinki was turned into a Shinju that later became Ryu. And because both Shinki and Gaara were taken out by this attack orchestrated by Mitsuri, the Moegi Shinju, the Hidden Sand is currently left without really any way to defend itself, as its two most powerful fighters were taken out simultaneously. And thus Konoha, being the big brother to the entire ninja world, decided to send a force to the Hidden Sand to back them up. And that force included Konohamaru, Sarada, and Mitsuki. Now the idea of sending this force was so the Konoha force could help the Hidden Sand force relocate the domes surrounding Mitsuki and possibly take out Matsuri, who should still be in the area. However, at the end of Chapter 16, it was revealed that not only Matsuri is still hanging out in the Land of Wind, but Ryu has joined her side. And thus now, it's not only just one Shinju, but two that this combined force of the Hidden Leaf and the Hidden Sand have to take out. And considering the fact that Gaara, Shinki, Yodo, and Ayara combined weren't enough to take on Matsuri and a couple of claw grinds, and Ryu should probably be stronger than Matsuri, the Boruto fanbase has begun to get kind of nervous about the upcoming fight, as the combined forces of Mitsuki, Sarada, Konohamaru, Yodo, and Ayara may not be enough to battle against Ryu and Matsuri simultaneously. And thus people have begun to speculate that this first real, big, important battle in 2 Blue Vortex that could have potential consequences of the life or death fashion for the participants is going to see the awakening and releasal of some powers from the participants we haven't seen yet. And the person that people are theorizing about the most is Konohamaru. See, because while Mitsuki and Sarada have put their newfound post-time skip strength on full display since the beginning of 2 Blue Vortex, Konohamaru hasn't. In fact, Konohamaru has seemed to assume the same role he assumed pre-time skip, which is unassuming. And thus there's been theories circulating around the interwebs that we are finally going to see the true strength of Konohamaru revealed in this upcoming fight. And that true strength will manifest as a Sage Mode. And there is some validity to these claims, both from a power scaling perspective and how it would immediately make Konohamaru somewhat relevant, and also from the perspective of the fact that it absolutely could happen. And thus today, we're going to be breaking down this theory because today we're talking Konohamaru's Sage Mode revealed. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So, to say that Konohamaru as a character in Boruto has been disappointing would be a bit of an understatement, especially when you consider the fact that if we're drawing parallels between Boruto and Naruto, Konohamaru should assume the role of a Kakashi-type character, one of the most powerful characters in the universe who you can always rely on to win in a fight. And yet Konohamaru has been anything but that in both Boruto and 2 Blue Vortex. And while it's not necessarily Konohamaru's fault, as the power scaling of the universe has gone absolutely insane and he just kind of missed the memo, but still unfortunate considering the fact that Konohamaru was essentially the second character ever introduced in the Naruto franchise, as he was introduced in the second chapter and second episode of Naruto. And thus for a character that's been around for 25 plus years, we'd like a little bit more growth. Genuinely, Konohamaru's only canon feats are defeating a White Zetsu in the Versus Momoshiki arc, getting knocked out by Ao's mirror drones to protect Boruto and the rest of his team from a sneak attack, being absolutely dismantled by Jigen's chakra rods, and then getting absolutely dismantled by Ishiki's chakra rods, falling in love with Ada, going through the time skip, and then even after the time skip, a time where he could have acquired a bunch more power, losing easily to Hidari. In fact, pretty much the only thing of any note that he's done in 2 Blue Vortex is cut down some claw crimes, something that Shikadai and the rest of Team 10 could do. That and handcuffing an unconscious Boruto after he got shot from miles away by Jura. So Konohamaru, in an incredibly important battle against Hidari, stood no chance. How on God's green earth is he going to stand a chance against 2 Shinju simultaneously? Especially when you consider the fact that the goal of one of those Shinju is to consume Konohamaru Konohamaru, as Matsuri, who was created from Moegi, wants to consume Konohamaru because Konohamaru was the most important person on Earth to Moegi. But if Matsuri was powerful enough to take on Gaara, Shinki, Ayara, and Yodo simultaneously, and Konohamaru has shown absolutely nothing to prove to be stronger than any of those people individually, let alone as a group, then how can we expect Konohamaru to stand an even okay chance at a fight here? Well, the answer to many doesn't lie in the fact that Konohamaru has shown off some new-ish Rasengans recently, like the defensive Rasengan he used in the battle against Hidari that allowed him to make essentially a wall of wind in front of him, canceling out Hidari's Chidori. And rather, people are looking towards something that people have speculated that Konohamaru was going to get for years now: a Sage Mode. But what kind of Sage Mode? And why would Konohamaru get one in the first place? And would it actually make him relevant in the power scaling of the Boruto universe? Well, people have been speculating for a long time about Konohamaru getting two separate possible Sage Modes. One being Toad Sage Mode, and the other being Monkey. And while there is technically merits to either of these ideas, there's also some points that make it seem as though that neither of these things are gonna happen. And thus, let's dive into each of these possibilities individually. And let's start first with the more possible, though maybe less fun option, which is Toad Sage Mode. See, the idea that Konohamaru was going to awaken to Toad Sage Mode has been an idea for years now, and for good reasons. For all intents and purposes, Konohamaru's entire character development arc has just been that he's Naruto without a tailed beast or Uzumaki chakra. Basically, Konohamaru is what Naruto would be if Naruto was born not the reincarnation of the child of God, which has made Konohamaru kind of boring. See, Konohamaru's jutsu scheme has always directly copied that of Naruto's, except for the fact that occasionally he'll mix in a couple of Sarutobi clan techniques, like the Burning Ash jutsu. But for the most part, Konohamaru has used things like Sexy Jutsu, Clone Jutsu, the Rasengan, and, as of Boruto, Toad summonings. And this is why people have believed for a long time that it just makes sense that Konohamaru is going to get a Sage Mode. Because if Konohamaru is supposed to be Naruto without the tailed beasts and without the ungodly amounts of chakra, it would make sense that about as far as he could go into his Naruto cycles would be Sage Mode, right? Because Sage Mode was the transformation that Naruto was able to accomplish prior to KCM1, something that Konohamaru can't do. And so if we're trying to make Konohamaru as close to Naruto as possible, it would make sense that Konohamaru would go as far down the Naruto cycle as he could with his own abilities, while simultaneously mirroring Naruto as closely as possible. And if Naruto became a Toad Sage, it would make sense, therefore, that Konohamaru himself would either train with the Toads or become a Toad Sage. And it appears as though that he has done that. In fact, it appears as though he did that long before even the time skip. See, because Konohamaru in episode 4 of Boruto, which technically doesn't come from the manga, but we'll talk about that in a second, broke up a skirmish at the Shinobi Academy by summoning a gigantic toad by the name of Gamagoro. Now, Gamagoro isn't a toad that we've ever seen before. However, he's not a toad that belongs to the Kashin, Koji, and Amados of the world. He is a real Mount Mubuko giant toad. And if Konohamaru was able to summon this giant toad, it means that in the blank period between the end of Shippuden and the beginning of Boruto, means more likely than not that Konohamaru has been training with the toads of Mount Mubuko. At the very least, this confirms with 100% certainty that he has entered into a summoning contract with at least one of the toads of Mount Mubuko, proving that Konohamaru is still following in Naruto's footsteps. But it's important to know here that entering into a summoning contract does not necessarily mean that Konohamaru is going to learn Sage Mode. Naruto entered into summoning contracts with toads long before he ever even begun training in Sage Mode. And that's because until Shippuden, Naruto's chakra control and his relationship with Kurama wasn't at a point where he could introduce Senjutsu chakra into his own body. However, that shouldn't necessarily be a problem for Konohamaru. I mean, he can do the Rasengan, which requires an insane amount of chakra control, and he's shown multiple times to have variations of that Rasengan, like the variation he used against Hidari defensively, which seemed to imply that his chakra and shape control are as high as they possibly could be without directly emulating Naruto. However, chakra control isn't necessarily the only aspect of becoming a sage. You also need to have a strong body and a ridiculous amount of chakra. Now, when I say a ridiculous amount of chakra, I'm not saying that you need to be on par with Naruto's levels of chakra, as characters like Jiraiya and Orochimaru have proved with their level of chakra they would be able to undergo a sage transformation. But Jiraiya and Orochimaru are 2 out of the 3 legendary Sannin and had an insane amount of chakra comparatively to your average ninja. And even Orochimaru, inarguably the strongest out of the legendary Sannin, can't undergo a sage transformation because their body isn't strong enough. And that's the third aspect required to become a sage. You need a strong body. Now, I'd reckon that Konohamaru's body is probably strong enough to undergo a sage transformation, but the question lies with how much chakra does Konohamaru have? Yes, Konohamaru is a Sarutobi, and the grandson of Hiruzen Sarutobi. A man who at 70 years old had enough chakra to pull out the souls of Hiruzen, Tobirama, and half of Orochimaru using the Reaper Death Seal. However, the Sarutobi aren't necessarily known for their chakra reserves. They're known for fire release, but not chakra reserves. Being known for massive chakra reserves is an honor usually only given to the Uzumaki and the Senju. And while the Sarutobi worked closely with those two clans, that doesn't mean that they were known for massive chakra reserves. And thus the question becomes, does Konohamaru have enough chakra to undergo a sage transformation? And the answer is we can't really know. Yes, we know that Konohamaru doesn't have as much chakra as Naruto, but does he have as much chakra as Jiraiya? It feels unlikely, but it is a possibility. But let's for a second assume that Konohamaru does have enough chakra to undergo a sage transformation. It may not be a perfect sage transformation, but it could be an imperfect one like Jiraiya had. Because if we're being entirely real with ourselves, if Konohamaru pulls off a perfect Toad sage transformation, that'd kind of be stupid. The only two people that we've ever seen canonically pull off a perfect Toad transformation were Minato and Naruto, who we know Konohamaru doesn't stack up against. And while yes, Minato claimed to not be all that good at Toad Sage transformation and still pull it off perfectly, I don't think I'm talking out of line when I say that Jiraiya is more powerful than Konohamaru, and Jiraiya himself couldn't pull off a perfect Toad Sage transformation. And therefore, if Konohamaru is gonna bust out a Toad Sage transformation, it will be an imperfect one. And if he does that, does it immediately make him relevant in the power scaling of the Boruto universe? No, not at all, actually. See, there's no hesitancy in me when I say that a Sage Mode transformation, even an imperfect one, would make Konohamaru stronger. And Sage Mode transformations, especially Toad Sage transformations, have proved to be useful in Boruto's timeline, from both the perspective of Naruto and Kashin Koji. Kashin Koji, with his perfect Toad transformation, was able to battle against a 10% Jigen and win. And while basically any and all power that he used against Ishiki was nullified immediately, and he was summarily almost killed, Kashin Koji being able to hang and win in a battle against a 10% Jigen is impressive, and a lot of that hinges on the fact that he was a perfect Toad Sage. Kashin Koji is also a cyborg created by Amado as a genetic clone of Jiraiya, a ninja we've already established is more powerful than Konohamaru probably ever will be. And as crazy as it sounds, a 10% Jigen is actually probably a pretty good watermark for how powerful your average Shinju is. I mean, if Kashin Koji was able to, with planning, take out a 10% Jigen, we can probably assume that Kashin Koji, with planning, would be able to take out one Shinju. So do I think that an inferior ninja in Konohamaru, comparatively to Kashin Koji undergoing an inferior transformation to Kashin Koji, would stand a chance in a battle against a Shinju? No, not really. Tie that into the fact that Konohamaru's Toad summoning technically isn't manga canon, as it was only ever shown in episode 4 of the Boruto anime, and as crazy as this sounds, episode 4 of the Boruto anime was already filler. Technically, Konohamaru has never summoned a Toad in the manga, and while the intro to Boruto's anime is canonized through the light novels that were made after the release of the anime beginning, the canonicity of these light novels, comparatively to other light novels, is shoddy at best. So I don't necessarily foresee a future where Konohamaru becomes a Toad Sage, because him becoming an incomplete Toad Sage wouldn't accomplish all that much in terms of increasing his power, and him becoming a perfect Toad Sage would be a slap in the face of Naruto and Minato, who only underwent that because they were much stronger ninjas than Konohamaru could ever hope to be. But that's the thing, hope is the through line through all of this. Konohamaru hopes to become the Hokage one day, and for Konohamaru to become the Hokage one day, he has to get way more powerful. But if you think about it from a timeline perspective, Konohamaru ever becoming the Hokage doesn't make that much sense. Let's say hypothetically at the ending of Boruto, Naruto is released from the Daikoku-ten. Shikamaru at that point would step down as the Hokage and Naruto would retake over. Naruto's grand goal in life is to become the Hokage. I can't necessarily see a reason for him to step down from being Hokage unless he dies or becomes too old to maintain the position. Because as we've seen in the Hokage ship, the only people who have ever stepped down from being Hokage were people who never wanted to be the Hokage in the first place, like Tsunade or Kakashi, both of whom stepped down when a more suitable Hokage was made present. Now yes, Hiruzen did step down as Hokage after the conclusion of the Third Great Shinobi World War, but he did so to stop the war. Naruto's not in a position to step down to stop any violence, and he wouldn't step down because he likes being Hokage. Maybe he would step down so he could spend more time with his family, at which point maybe Konohamaru could take over, but Shikamaru has unfortunately set the precedent that you no longer have to be the strongest person in the village to be Hokage. And therefore we don't even necessarily have the rationale that Konohamaru has to become the strongest person person, Konoha, to become the next Hokage. Because Shikamaru's barely tree level and he's currently Hokage. But the possibility that seems infinitely more likely to me than Konohamaru becoming the Hokage is that Naruto will continue to rule as Hokage until Sarada is old enough to take over the mantle, at which point Sarada will become the 9th-ish Hokage. I say 9th-ish because Shikamaru doesn't necessarily count himself as the 8th Hokage. But does Konohamaru not necessarily having a compelling argument to become a Toad Sage nullify the idea that he'll get stronger, presumably through a Sage mode? No. Not 100% at least. See, because, well, yes, to me at least it wouldn't make sense that Konohamaru become a Toad Sage. There are, hypothetically, other Sage modes that he could achieve. Unfortunately, they're based on even less evidence than the idea that Konohamaru could become a Toad Sage. And that somewhat crazy idea that would do a more effective job of scaling Konohamaru to a higher level in the immediacy is that Konohamaru has the potential to become a monkey sage. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there who are probably screaming at your computers right now and saying monkey sages don't exist. And yeah, no, you're kind of right, they don't. In fact, monkey summons have only ever been seen canonically through the medium of one person, and that one person was Hiruzen, not Konohamaru. See, Hiruzen has, to me, undoubtedly the strongest summon in the entirety of the Naruto universe, and that summon is Monkey King Enma, king of the monkeys, who, in tandem with Hiruzen, is supposed to be a reference to Monkey King Wukong. And the reason that King Enma and Hiruzen are supposed to be a dual reference to Wukong is because while Enma is the king of the monkeys, Enma turns into a staff that's wielded by Hiruzen that's able to extend infinitely like Sun Wukong's staff. And therefore, through the combined forces of both of them, they're supposed to be a reference to Wukong. Now, while it's never necessarily been confirmed or denied that every summoning animal has an attached Sage mode, it seems to be a relatively consistent ruling that if there is more than one of that summoning animal, they have a Sage mode attached. What do I mean by this? Well, let's go over it quickly. By far and away, the most common types of summoning in the Naruto universe are toads and snakes, both of whom tie their roots back to sage areas. The snake's home is Ryuchi Cave, while the toad's home is Mount Muabuka. And since both of these summoning animals hail from sage areas, they appear to have the ability to teach humans sage mode. Now, obviously, if you extend to this rationale, it would stand to reason that the slugs of Shikatsu Forest also have a sage mode. However, what's weird about the slugs of Shikatsu Forest is the fact that we've only ever seen Lady Katsuya. Now, this obviously could be because of the sexism, as Lady Katsuya and the slugs have always been connected to women like Tsunade and Sakura, but it could also stand the reason that maybe Lady Katsuya was the only slug in Shikatsu Forest, and therefore, because there's only one of her as a summoning animal, they don't have an attached sage mode. Now, it's most likely sexism, but for the moment, let's assume it's because there's only one Lady Katsuya. While there has been other summoning animals that do seem to have multiples, like dogs, that don't have an attached sage mode, we don't necessarily know whether or not dogs do have an attached sage mode. It's just that nobody's ever really tried. And therefore, Monkey King Enma being referred to as the Monkey King, and therefore the king of the monkeys, seems to imply that he hails over a region where many monkeys live. And regions where many monkeys live have been referred to many times in the Naruto universe. As Son Goku, the Four Tails has also been referred to as the king of the sage monkeys. It ties its roots back to a forested area that has a waterfall, which is a reference to the fact that in the beginning of the Journey to the West, the book from the 1500s in China where Sun Wukong was created, monkeys that Sun Wukong lived amongst lived behind a waterfall that Sun Wukong had to walk through to begin his journey to the west. So there's a couple of different events in Naruto that seem to confirm the fact that there is a bunch of monkeys and they live in a sage area of sorts. And therefore there's been theories percolating online for a while now that if anybody was going to awaken to a monkey sage mode, it would be Konohamaru. And this is only further confirmed by the fact that he has a monkey summoning in Enra. However, that monkey summoning in Enra is just like his toad summoning, only anime canon, as Enra appears in Boruto episode 119 and is never shown in the manga ever. Because Enra, so far as we know, is a Konohamaru love arc exclusive character. Now, Enra seems to have all the same abilities, just slightly worse than Monkey King Enma, in that he's able to turn into a staff and participate in Fuinjutsus with his summoner, Konohamaru. And thus, if we're saying that Konohamaru has a connection with the toads because he summoned a toad in an anime-only episode, we can also say that he's got a connection with the monkeys. And thus, there's an equal possibility that he awakens the sage mode for the monkeys as there is from the toads. The only real difference being that there's a track record of toad sage mode in the Naruto universe. However, there not being a track record of monkey sage mode actually is better off for Konohamaru and the theory that he's going to become a monkey sage. Because here's the thing, if Konohamaru becomes a toad sage, we're going to compare him to other great toad sages, Jiraiya, Minato, Naruto. And if he becomes a perfect toad sage, it's kind of a spit in the face of Jiraiya, and if he doesn't become a perfect toad sage, then he's not going to be all that powerful. However, monkey sage mode isn't constrained by those same ideals. If Konohamaru were to become a monkey sage, 1, we don't know how difficult it is, and 2, we don't know how much power it confers. This would be an entirely new form to the Naruto universe. And with that new form, it's not crazy to assume that Konohamaru wouldn't be able to achieve a level of power that we've never seen with a sage mode prior. Maybe that's why nobody ever learned monkey sage mode, because it was too difficult, or because they didn't know they could learn it in the first place. But because of Konohamaru's Sarutobi connection's a really cool way to flesh out his character and the connection to his clan, one of the most storied clans in the Naruto universe would be to show the training that he did with the sage monkeys during the time skip. Because if we're being real, while it makes sense that Konohamaru would have a closer connection with the Toads because he's supposed to be Naruto 2.0 essentially, I find from a narrative and plot perspective it would be more compelling if he actually leaned away from trying to be Naruto 2.0 and went to his roots, that is, his clan. Fun storytelling that ties back into the roots of Naruto while also giving Konohamaru a boost in power that makes him relevant in TBV is a win-win if you ask me. But neither of those things are going to happen. I don't think Konohamaru is going to become a monkey sage or a toad sage. In fact, I don't think Konohamaru is going to get any boosts in power. Why don't I think either of those things are going to happen? Well, because Konohamaru's not a relevant character. And as much as I love Ikimoto and where he's currently taking Boruto, if you weren't immediately established as a relevant character in the early parts of part 1 of Boruto, then you're not going to get your relevancy now. Mitsuki and Sarada are currently scraping and clawing away for screen time. While they've been shown in some capacities in TBV, like Mitsuki's battle against Boruto, they should be 2 of the top 5 most used characters in Boruto, and yet they're being sidelined pretty consistently for more important characters like Boruto or Kawaki. And thus to assume that Konohamaru is going to take a step forward in terms of importance means that other people kind of have to take a somewhat big step backwards. The time allocated to Konohamaru has to be allocated away from other people, and unfortunately I don't necessarily see that happening. But some of you are sitting there and saying, but then Nick, why would Konohamaru be established as a consumption threat? Why would they send him to the hidden sand? Obviously, he's about to have a bunch of screen time. And you're right, he is about to have more screen time than he had prior. But everybody who's thinking that Mitsuki, Sarada, Konohamaru, Yoda, and Ayara are going to be the only people battling against Matsuri and Ryu are, I'm sorry, wrong. 1, let's not forget who told Shikamaru to send these 3 people to the Land of Wind. It was Kashin Koji, which means that Kashin Koji knows the current movings of Konoha. And Kashin Koji is the person in control of moving Boruto. And while Boruto may not have been seen in chapter 16, you know what was seen in the second to last page of chapter 16? A toad. As Ryu and Matsuri were standing there looking down to this toad, wondering what it was doing here in the middle of this desert. And I'll tell you what this toad is doing right there in the middle of this desert. It's marking Gaara's location for Boruto and Kashin Koji. Listen, while I do think it would be a cool parallel for Sarada to have the first important fight in part 2 of this story, like Sakura had the first important fight of Naruto Shippuden without the MC involved, I think purposely establishing the fact in the second to last page of chapter 16 that there is a toad in the middle of this desert, and toads are what Boruto uses to teleport places, tied into the fact that Kashin Koji was the person to direct these forces towards Gaara's Iron Sand Dome, seems to imply that Boruto is going to be involved in this fight, which makes sense because Boruto has been established time and time again as the only person who stands a chance against the Shinju, minus Kawaki, who's trying to get his limiters off right now. So what do I believe is more likely? That Konohamaru is going to get a power-up and stand a chance in the battle against the Shinju, or the same thing that's been happening for the entirety of Boruto is going to keep happening, and Boruto is going to inject himself into every single fight to become the only relevant person in terms of power scaling. That makes it sound like I'm hating on it. I'm genuinely not. But I do think a battle against 2 Shinju is going to require Boruto's input. And while I do believe a big part of the upcoming battle is going to be Matsuri versus Konohamaru in some capacity, I believe the thing that's going to happen is that Konohamaru is just going to reveal himself to be a little bit more powerful than we thought up until this point. See, because Konohamaru getting beaten in every single fight he participates in isn't necessarily Konohamaru's fault. He just keeps fighting the final bosses of all of the arcs before anybody else gets there. Now, Matsuri, for all intents and purposes, should be probably the second weakest Shinju, which will probably still make her much more powerful than Konohamaru. But if Team 7 fights alongside Konohamaru in the battle against Matsuri, that is to say, Sarada, Mitsuki, and Konohamaru work together to fight Matsuri, that would leave Boruto and the New Age Sand siblings to battle against Ryu. And considering the fact that it's already been established that Ryu is stronger than Code, who's stronger than everybody in the universe outside of Boruto, every human in the universe,
then it would make sense that the only person appropriate ready to fight Ryu would be Boruto.
But I could see Mitsuki getting injected into this fight because Mitsuki and Shinki fight during the Chunin exams. And unfortunately, that just seems like the more likely scenario. Kishimoto has had dozens of opportunities for Konohamaru to reveal a new mode. And I'd reckon that if Konohamaru was gonna bust out a new mode, he'd probably do it while fighting against the Shinju version of Sasuke in Hidari. And yet all Konohamaru did was get beaten around by Hidari and wait for Boruto to swing in so that he could eventually arrest the unconscious Boruto. Konohamaru isn't necessarily a character we need to see have a power-up. One, he ties his roots back to Naruto, and two, all of his students are undergoing crazy power-ups right now. Think about Kakashi's role in Shippuden. Yes, Kakashi was always relevant in terms of the power scaling of the universe, but he was much more so in part 1 of Naruto. Yeah, he was able to Kamui off Deidara's arm, and he was crucial in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, but between the time skip and the 4th Great Shinobi World War, how much does Kakashi really do? And I believe that's kind of the role that Konohamaru is going to fulfill right now, minus the fact that he never got to be relevant like Kakashi was in part 1 of Naruto. But then again, I don't know, maybe I'm just hating. Do you guys believe that Konohamaru has a power-up waiting in the wings for him? Tell me in the comments below. While you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I don't have a gym here, so I've just been doing like Saitama's workout, like run up a mountain 4 times and do 100 push-ups and 100 squats and 100 crunches. And I miss the cold feel of steel wrapped in my fingies. And my dogs.